It's a pleasure to introduce our plenary speaker. A Colorado native, Rosemary Rodriguez is the executive director of Together We Count. She formerly served on the Denver City Council and as a commissioner on the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. She also chaired the 2001 Colorado Reapportionment Commission, a constitutional body responsible for redrawing legislative districts after the 2000 census. Together We Count works to understand the apprehensions that discourage the hard-to-count communities from census participation and develops trustworthy information to encourage the encounter. Rosemary? Thank you.
Good morning, and on behalf of the City and County of Denver, I apologize for that. I'm taking this so personally because as a former city councilor, you get blamed for everything, and I'm still in that mode, even though it's been a number of years since I served on the council. And I'm delighted to be here today. I want to thank the Community Indicators Consortium for your extraordinary work. I've learned a lot about you since learning of this conference, and commend you for the focus of your 2019 Impact Summit. We share a common passion and mission: the profound importance of community indicators to inform, guide, and activate progress and equity in our communities goes to the essence of our efforts at Together We Count. There are few government functions in this nation that equal the extraordinary breadth and reach and impact of the decennial exercise known as the U.S. Census. In Colorado, because we are a semi-arid to arid climate, even though it's snowing in October, we cherish our headwaters as a lifeblood for our state, critical to the health and sustenance of our water supply, wildlife, our recreation economy, and everything downstream. Like headwaters, the U.S. Census is a life source for our democracy. At a time when people are being devalued from the highest corridors of power based on their ethnicity, race, income, or place of origin, the census is as profoundly important as it has ever been in our nation's history. Rooted in our Constitution, the census figuratively, legally, and literally validates that every man, woman, child, or however one chooses to identify counts. Everyone in our nation counts. It is a powerful antidote to the systematic effort that we are seeing from some forces in our country to minimize, dehumanize, and delegitimize tens of millions of people, our neighbors, our colleagues, and in many cases, our family members. These are the same forces that feel threatened by the census and are trying to prevent its lawful implementation. The census is also the greatest grassroots effort our nation ever undertakes, and may be among the least understood pillars of our democracy. That is why my life now is all census all the time. The census provides the essential data to enable our government to serve our residents with efficiency and equity. It determines the distribution of more than $800 billion federal dollars and billions more in private investment. Almost every aspect of American civic and economic life is touched and guided by the census. Numerous federal spending programs are census guided, from highway construction to K-12 education, Nutrition programs are libraries, Medicaid, foster care, public safety, and emergency services, to name but a few. In many cases, the accuracy of our census data is a matter of life and death. For businesses, census data inform where to locate, where to expand, what items to put on store shelves. With its impact on transportation funding for business is critical to ensuring employees can travel to work and that they can move their products to market. But the 2020 census is different than previous census. Census says, at least different than the past three. I have been involved from a community or a governing perspective since 1989. Starting as a community member, I monitored the 1990 census. In 2000, I participated from a governance vantage point as the Denver County Clerk. In 2010, my viewpoint was from a United States Senator's office as his state director. I have had the benefit and burden of a variety of perspectives, and they lead me to conclude that 2020 will be different. Because in between 2010 and 2020, I was elected to the Denver Public Schools Board of Education. It was in that role that I glimpsed the problems we are going to face in 2020. In March of 2017, while I was preparing to retire from Senator Michael Bennett's office, I served on a panel to discuss issues that children of immigrants were facing in an era where immigrants were being targeted, isolated, and in some situations excluded. You see, at Denver Public Schools, we realized that parents were not enrolling their children for benefits for which they were entitled, like free and reduced lunch. We learned that children's parents were developing plans, packing emergency suitcases, and forming phone trees in the event that they were picked up by immigration enforcement. It was while serving on this panel that I learned that families were declining to enroll or withdrawing from hunger programs. And I realized that if a family would forego food for their children, they were feeling hopeless. And I immediately thought of the 2020 census. I thought that if they wouldn't take benefits for their children, they may not participate in the census. As we at Together We Count learned more about the census, we realized that many families had already foregone participation in a variety of programs, and that we risked many more might take that step. As a result of my concerns, I have spent my retirement years thus far trying to determine how I might make a difference in my community by becoming engaged with the census. But first, I will back up a few steps and explain why it's important that households participate. I will discuss some intentional efforts to depress census participation and what Together We Count and many others are doing to try to engage hard-to-count communities and ultimately build trust in government and expand civic participation. First of all, we'll start with the citizenship question. Whenever Together We Count makes a presentation, even though it has been removed from the form, many of the questions surround the question. So we'll start there. Oops. You know what, Jillian, I left my deck on the table. This is my colleague, Jillian Winborn, without whom this project is not possible. So the U.S. Census has a complicated history with the questions of citizenship on the form. We at Together We Count anticipated that the question might well be on the 2020 form, despite experts who kept telling us it was too late. But at the end of March 2018, the question was added. It was virtually the 11th hour on the census timeline, Lawsuits were immediately filed, and ultimately the New York case was heard by the Supreme Court. The state of Colorado had joined the New York challenge to the citizenship question, along with a number of other cities and states. The Supreme Court ruled to block the question from the form, writing that the administration's justification for the question, quote, enforcing the Voting Rights Act, end quote, was a pretext to justify adding the question rather than a real reason. And the court gave the administration more time to try again by offering more genuine reasons for adding the question. But the clock had run out, basically, because all the parties had agreed that the Census Bureau needed to start printing forms at the beginning of July 2019, expecting that over 1.5 billion pages of census documents will be needed for the 2020 census. So the 2020 census again will proceed without the citizenship question. There is a question on citizenship on the American Community Survey, which is an extensive survey that's sent to a percentage of the population, the US population annually. Interestingly, the Bureau's own data indicates that the citizenship question on the American Community Survey is less likely to be answered honestly, if answered at all, for the past 5 years. But on the left is the 1950 census question that involves citizenship. It asks what state or foreign country was the person filling out the form born in, was he born in? It was 1950. If born outside the continental United States, territory, or foreign country. The 1970 long form had a citizenship question. For persons born in a foreign country, they were asked to answer, were they naturalized? And when did they come to the US to stay? And they had options. This is the American Community Survey census question. Is person one a citizen of the United States? And you have options. Yes, born in the United States. Yes, born in Puerto Rico, Guam, the US Virgin Islands, or Northern Marianas. Yes, born abroad of US citizen parent or parents. Yes, US citizen by naturalization. Print year. And no, not a US citizen. The census's own research report read thus. 3 years ago, it was so much easier to get respondents compared to now because of the government changes and trust factors. 3 years ago, I didn't have a problem with the immigration question, said the interviewer. And that was the census's own research. So we had indicators that the citizenship question was going to create problems for many people, yet the government persisted in trying to, the administration persisted in trying to put the question on the form. Ken Pruitt may cover some of this tomorrow, but suffice it here to say that before adding questions to a decennial census form that goes to every U.S. resident, the Census Bureau requires extensive testing. Questions are typically not added at the 11th hour. So right to this point, we've established the importance of the census, some of the bumps in the road that have occurred along the way, and now I want to focus on what Together We Count is doing to build census participation and eventually civic participation in our community. And I want to start by saying, because 2020 was feeling so different, we decided that we in Colorado had to work harder. And probably before you planned a trip here, you looked at the landscape here, not the the physical landscape, but the economy here, and you realize that we have a lot of attributes. We have a robust economy, very, very low unemployment. Some people call it the land of milk and honey. We love it here, but underlying all of that gloss are some challenges. Together We Count developed a nonprofit whose mission is to ensure that hard-to-count communities across Colorado are fairly and accurately counted in the 2020 census. But who is hard to count? We, in planning our outreach and our intent to take a giant step toward equity for the people of Colorado, have extensively studied who we need to reach out to. And these population groups are considered hard to count. Lower socioeconomic income, renters, 35% of our state housing is rental. Immigrants, our rural communities, of which we have vast geographic areas. Homeless, our homeless people experiencing homelessness. We added older adults. The census does not technically believe that older adults are in this hard-to-count population, but we have reasons for that. Refugees and young children. And in the state of Colorado, in a population over 5 million, 1.5 million of our residents fall into these categories. And that, Together We Count, to many, many others, is a serious situation. But back to older adults, because of the critical need to ensure an accurate count of older adults in Colorado, we are including them in our work with hard-to-count populations to ensure that they receive outreach and educational materials to prepare for full participation. Historically, seniors have been considered very eager to engage in civic society, but they have, this time, we believe it's different. Because of for the first time, the primary way to respond to the census will be through the internet. And although there is still the option for a paper response and also a phone method that was added for 2020, many seniors may be confused by the changes and may not respond to phone calls because of the proliferation of phone scams directed at them. Additionally, research has shown that seniors are much more likely than younger adults to say they never go online. The share of non-internet users aged 65 and older is decreasing, but 27% still do not use the internet, compared to fewer than 10% of adults under the age of 65. And in Colorado, the older adult population continues to rise with existing population growth and a number of older adults moving to the state. The population of older adults in Colorado ages 65 to 74 grew by 40% from 2010 to 2015. It's a very desirable place for retirees. Colorado has also experienced an increase in the number of people, young and old, living in complex households, as the affordable housing inventory lags behind demand. Multi-generational households are common, with over 48,000 Colorado children being raised by their grandparents. And many households are opening up their homes to roommates or home shares. 9 out of 10 older adults have indicated a desire to age in place for financial and other considerations. With the rise in complex households, it is imperative that individuals be counted on the household form and that a complete census represent everyone who lives there, not just the homeowner. In addition to older adults, Together We Count has also prioritized young children, immigrants, refugees, and rural residents in its work. And in developing plans to reach hard-to-count communities, we have inevitably encountered overlap with other hard-to-count indicators, especially with linguistically isolated households, particularly in rural Colorado. Hard-to-count communities feel increasingly targeted by political rhetoric and proposed policies, and are therefore less inclined to participate in civic, social, and religious activities. We've seen some communities that are experiencing marked decline in religious participation. The Migration Policy Institute estimates that 15% of immigrants are not accepting benefits or enrolling their children for school lunches and other programs. So without a fair and accurate count of the 2020 census, households that are in need of federal program assistance and political representation will be in jeopardy of being rendered invisible. For the past 2 years, Together We Count has been, this map, just the darker the color, the larger the growth in aging population. I'm sorry, I'm not keeping good in sync with these slides. In 2010, we missed 18,000 children in the state of Colorado. We see a lot of dual effort in reaching the adults and raising them. And this is, we prefer these CUNY CUNY maps because we like the colors and they're so data rich, but this is the hard-to-count map of the state of Colorado. The land of milk and honey has a few issues. Together We Count. So for the past 2 years, Together We Count has been building relationships and developing partners with trusted organizations across Colorado. These include nonprofits, businesses, faith communities, foundations, government, and the advocacy community. Our model is based on research identifying the effectiveness of working with trusted messengers and training them to carry the important message of census participation. Trusted messengers, and this is based on research, include medical providers, teachers, family members, and in some instances, first responders, like firefighters and EMTs. In some communities, police might not be the trusted messenger, police departments. With our partners, we have established Together We Count as a census hub that can provide expertise, information, and communications about the census. We provide training to any organization that believes it will be beneficial for their staff, board, or partners. We have also encouraged nonprofits to apply for supplemental funds either through our mini grant fund or the state of Colorado's $6 million census grant program. Our efforts are starting to bear fruit as we work in partnership with the Census, the United States Census very closely, the state of Colorado, and local efforts to begin the community dialogue necessary to create a census movement. The 2020 census is facing challenges and will require unprecedented local efforts to achieve an accurate count. If we are successful, though, we will have communicated with a vast number of people that they are community builders by their census participation. We will have established a communications network and plan to promote accurate information and counter misinformation that can be replicated in future efforts. And we will have the experience and evidence of participating in the largest peacetime mobilization our nation undertakes. This is the most powerful slide of this presentation, and I get a little emotional when I think about it. Several groups have done message testing, and the message that might move hard-to-count populations is that it's good for their community. They might set aside their fear and isolation to do something because it's good for their community. To me, that's power. The beauty of this entire episode leading up to today is that our constitutional safeguards held. The court held the administration had to have a good reason for adding the citizenship question to the 2020 form, period, full stop. If there had been time, the administration might have been able to accomplish their goal, but the time had lapsed. We talked about the census as the headwaters of our democracy at the beginning of this presentation. And one of my favorite quotes is by President Abraham Lincoln, and it's from his State of the Union address in 1864. The Congress had, prior to the end of their session, passed an Encouragement of Immigration Act. And he was lauding the Congress for passing that. And he said, "I regard our immigrants as one of the principal replenishing streams appointed by Providence. It is our strongest hope that the census remain the life force of our democracy, and that immigrants, all the other hard-to-count populations, young people who don't want to give personal data to the government, even though they use social media and things like that, that everyone that we touch never fear participating, taking their first sip from this stream of civic participation." That concludes my remarks, and I'd be happy to take questions if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Is that okay? Before we start, this is another census research conclusion, and this is based on fears of worry that respondents think the census might be used against them. And the groups with the highest levels of fear include the 41% is the Asian community, 39 is low English proficiency, 34 responded to the form in Spanish, 34 were born outside of the U.S., and then 32 had a less than high school diploma, and 31% reside in hard-to-count neighborhoods.
All right, thank you. So, so indicate if you'd like to have a question or comment, and I'll make my way over. I want to thank you for your work. Coming from Syracuse, New York, a refugee resettlement community, we have over 10,000 resettled refugees, and so being reminded that they're hard to count is very helpful, and we have a lot to learn from your work. So,
hi, thank you. You mentioned your state partnership with the federal partnership, and one of the things we deal with a lot, and my colleague Donovan from Miami is here, Hillsborough County in Florida. On a larger level, we're pretty well organized, but how are you implementing this in terms of community-based or extraordinarily local targeting of these populations? How are you reaching in to these hard-to-count populations?
So we're working with trusted nonprofit organizations. We spent